Okay, we're recording. Let's go ahead and start the case.
Okay. So the Crayon company is the leading crayon manufacturer. Their products have a global reach, strong brand, and are well regarded both for their affordability and quality. They have extended their brand into colored pencils as well as markers and have just entered the market for coloring books. Although the company has seen exceptionally consistent growth and strong growth in the past, sales started to become flat about 5 years ago and have actually been declining over the last 3 years. The CEO has brought our firm in to diagnose the problem and offer a comprehensive solution that will pull his brand out of the recent decline.
Okay, this sounds like a very colorful case here. So I'm just going to repeat some of the facts that I heard. So our client is Crayon Co. They're a leading global manufacturer of coloring tools like pencils and markers, and they've just recently entered the coloring books space. And they're known for having affordable and quality products. Their growth has historically been strong, but in the past 5 years, their sales have gone flat. And then in the past 3 years, their sales have actually declined. And so we've been called in to help the CEO solve, basically diagnose, what is causing this problem and also propose a solution. Did I understand everything correctly?
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So I'd like to ask a few high-level questions to get a better understanding of the situation that our client is in. So I guess the first thing is you've said that this company is global, and I just want to understand, are we trying to diagnose a problem on a global level, or are we trying to segment by geography of any kind?
So the company, what I can tell you is that the company does sell internationally, but 80% of their sales are in the US. So use your judgment in thinking, where should we focus our first efforts?
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Okay. And then the second thing I'd like to know is I just want to clarify the business model of Crayon Co. to understand how cash flows. So is the idea that they sell to retailers who then sell to consumers, or do they have other means of selling? Like, do they sell through e-commerce, for instance? Like, what are sort of their revenue channels?
So they sell across a wide variety of outlets. And I'd say that for our discussion, it isn't very relevant because they've seen declines across consistently across all channels.
Okay, so it's not a channel-specific problem. That's interesting to me. Okay, so next I would like to just clarify and refine the objective that the CEO has pitched us on. They wanted a solution to their declining sales, but I'd like to be able to help quantify what that really means. And so should our solution be to get them profitable again, to get them very, very profitable again? Like, do we have like a number benchmark to quantify that?
So we just want to return ourselves to positive sales growth.
Positive sales growth. Okay, so when you say positive sales growth, you're saying that's not respective to the costs, right? Just the sales numbers themselves. We want them to be a positive growth.
Yeah, and if you go back to the prompt, so the problem was that sales became flat 5 years ago, and they declined over the last 3 years. And so the goal moving forward is to return us to a positive sales growth over the next few years.
Okay. Is there a timeline that you want this to be accomplished by?
Not really, but think about, say, the end of next year.
Okay, yeah, the sooner the better, I'd imagine. Okay, well, if it's all right with you, I'm going to take just a few moments to structure my thoughts.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'd like to present my roadmap for how I want to tackle this question. So to me, the heart of what's going on is probably rooted in the company's financials. So that's the first area that I want to look at. And specifically within financials, I want to look at sales figures segmented by the different product lines. So we're talking the number of pencils that are sold and at what price they're sold at. And if we can segment those into like, boxes of small pencils versus large boxes of pencils, et cetera. So we do that for pencils. We'll do the same thing for markers, and we'll do the same thing for coloring books. And the reason that we do this is so that we can figure out which product line might be responsible for their decline in sales, or perhaps it's multiple product lines, but we'll be able to know if we do this analysis. Now, second is I want to just mention costs briefly. I don't think that they are central to the problem because the core question here is what is hurting our sales. But I'm just going to throw costs in just in case we do need to look at that and whether it affects our overall strategy recommendation, just to be thorough. The second area I would like to look at is the company's sales strategy. And what I mean by that is what product lines can they also offer in addition to pencils, markers, and coloring books, because there are other types of art supplies that are related to these products that might complement well in their sales strategy. A second item I would like to look at underneath the sales strategy bucket is customer segmentation. Perhaps there are certain customers types that just purchase more? And if so, do we perhaps want to target them a little more powerfully than we currently target them? And overall, though, I would say we want to focus our studies on the US because, as you mentioned, 80% of sales take place domestically. The third category I'd like to examine are the operations. And when it comes to operations, there are two things that I'm thinking about. One is on the distribution side. So I know that sales have declined across all channels, and I wonder whether there might be one channel that's easier to fix than the others. And if so, we would want to prioritize that channel, like fixing that channel first, as far as the timeline for our solution. The other side of operations that's on my mind is the supply side. So can we get something more efficient going on from our suppliers that might in turn have like a trickle down effect on our sales figures? And then fourth and last is the marketing considerations. And what I mean by that is things like, how is our brand doing lately? Maybe something external in the news has happened that has damaged our reputation and that's hurting sales. Maybe something macroeconomic is going on that's hurting all of our competitors, including ourselves, and we want to understand that. But whatever the cause might be, I want to be thinking about how can we position our brand and market better so that we can drive up sales, since marketing does drive up sales growth. So those are my four considerations, but I think what's most important and what should come first are the financials. And so I would love to analyze the revenue by different product lines, as I mentioned before.
Now that makes a lot of sense. And in line with that, why don't you go ahead and open up Exhibit 1 and then, try to think about, like you said, which product line is the most profitable and how much is revenue expected to change in 2015, assuming that we are in 2015.
2015. Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few moments to digest what I'm seeing here. Okay, so before I get into any number crunching, just looking at a high level, what I'm seeing is that across these four different product lines, three of them, markers, pencils, and coloring books, are responsible for the decrease in sales because revenue growth is negative, and with coloring books being the most responsible for that. And just to drill down on an earlier question I asked, because I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding. When we talk about sales being down, we mean just the revenue side, right? We don't mean that profit is down. Like sales is what we're trying to diagnose and fix, not the cost, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So if hurting costs are not the issue, then intuitively what I would do is actually just mentally kind of segment off the COGS, SG&A, and cost of capital right now and look just at those revenue numbers, because the fundamental problem we're trying to solve is to grow revenue in these areas that are hurting. And there are two primary considerations that come to mind that I would want to analyze. First is whether we can project the amount of growth we can turn around for coloring books, pencils, and markers, and what it would cost us to do so. And the second is whether we might want to just get rid of those product lines altogether. And we would make that decision if and only if the financial calculations show that it's not financially prudent to invest in trying to grow these lines. And so we might have to cut our losses and just discontinue them.
And when you say that, we'd like to cut our losses and then try to find out which items or products make the most sense for us financially, what are some of the metrics that you could look at?
Yeah, so to put it in very general terms to start, let's say I have $1 that I can put into crayons, markers, pencils, or coloring books. I can invest it into any of these lines. What I would ask is, what would be the return on that dollar? Would it be like $1.50, $1.20, less than $1, depending on which line I put it into? And based on that, I would determine whether it's worthwhile to grow these other lines or to discontinue them.
So let's do that.
Okay. So let's see. It's moving the camera apart. Okay. What I'm thinking is I would take the COGS number and treat that as my proverbial dollar that I mentioned, where what kind of return a dollar would bring me. And yeah, basically the lower the COGS, the more return on production I would get if I invested in any given product line. Is that on the right track, or are you thinking something else?
No, I think so. Looking at costs in isolation, I don't think would be helpful, because if you're trying to come up with the lowest cost, then you'd have to measure it against an investment amount, right? So if every item, for instance, costs you 20 cents on the dollar and another costs you 10 cents on the dollar, then indirectly you're looking at the profitability. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So even though the CEO is not interested in profitability, I still have to do a profitability just because it would help us understand.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's where I got tripped up a little bit. Okay. So how about this? What if I took revenue for each product line, subtracted the fixed costs, which are the SG&A and cost of capital, and then take what's left and compare it to COGS and take that ratio and do the same thing with each product line. And that would tell me which product lines are most worthwhile. Does that approach make sense to you?
Let's just do it a bit more simply, where we're just trying to calculate an overall profitability. So, let's just do it that way.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'll start with crayons. And with crayons, we have 140 million in revenue. And I know that 17% of that 140 is going to be cost of capital. So I'm going to take 0.17 and multiply it by 14. And I get 3, 1.
And if this wasn't clear before, don't consider interest expense. So I think when you multiply the 17% with 140, what you get is the interest expense of the business for the capital that they've employed. And so, let's not go there, and let's just try to find out what is my EBITDA for every product. And then from EBITDA, what is that EBITDA over revenue? That's going to give me the profitability. Does that make sense?
Okay, so if I'm doing EBITDA, I'm just looking at revenue minus COGS. Does that include SG&A?
Yeah.
Overhead type. Okay. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So, all right, I'm not going to multiply by 17. I'm just going to do 140 minus 85. 140 minus 70 is 70. 15 is 55. So we have $55 after COGS for crayons. And we have another 20 for SGA. So minus 20 equals $35 or $35 million in profit. And then I'm going to repeat that process with markers. So we have 225 minus 200 is 25 mil. And then after SG&A, we're looking at a loss of 5 million. With pencils, we have 80 million minus 25 is 55. And then after an SG&A, which is 30, is that right? Yeah, 30, yeah. That leaves us 25 million in the positive. And then lastly, with coloring books, we're looking at 35 million in revenue minus 20 COGS is 15 million minus 30 SG&A is negative 15, so $15 million loss. Okay, so now that we've done that, we know that coloring books first and markers second are actually the most responsible for our loss in profits, which correlates, but it's not exactly identical to the reduced revenue growth. So that's pretty interesting, and I can appreciate why. So profit, while it does correlate with revenue, because there are costs involved, that can be an explanatory factor for why, like pencils, for instance, are still profitable even though the revenue growth is down.
So, sorry, did you say? Can you repeat the two items that you thought were the least profitable?
Yeah, coloring books because they've lost us $15 million, and markers because they've lost us $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so we know which product lines are responsible for declining profit. I guess coming back to my earlier hypothesis is I'd want to evaluate whether we should try to turn around these products or cut them altogether. And I guess to answer that question, it would depend on how saturated these markets are. Like, for example, if no one else is making coloring books, but a lot of people are making crayons, even though crayons is profitable, per dollar investment we put into growing crayons might not produce any returns compared to trying to turn around coloring books. And so my question that I would shape out of this hypothesis is, do we have any data on the market, on like the competition or anything of that sort?
We don't have any information on competition, but it would be helpful to think through certain other factors that you can use to generate revenue outside of the 4 products that we've just discussed.
Oh, like brainstorming other products to pursue?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll take a moment. So we're talking like strictly about products that are similar to these, right?
Whatever you think, a crayon company can get into reasonably and make a good profit margin out of.
Okay. Yeah, let me think about that. Let's see. Okay, so some ideas I have for potential product expansions. One category is to basically use the same manufacturing expertise that we have to make products that are similar to what we currently have. So what I mean by that is we have colored markers. Why don't we have like professional type markers, like highlighters, ones that are used more in a business rather than a recreational setting. Similar statements can be made with pencils. So we have colored pencils right now. Why don't we do just like normal pencils that an architect might use for drafting versus like a school student's pencils, just like different pencil lines. So that's like within our current kind of manufacturing expertise. Another category of products I would suggest are things that interact with our existing products. So, we have a lot of writing utensils. What do they write on? Is paper. So we can do construction paper, we can do lined paper, just all kinds of supplementary or complementary products that go well with our writing utensils. Stationery is another good one. And then the last thing I have on my mind would be to digitize our products. So a lot of art these days takes place on a screen. And so perhaps we can get into the like coloring software world or like some kind of photo editing partnership, something along those lines, since we already have a brand that is associated with colors.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And so I guess what you're trying to say is that broadly one category would be for office supplies, and then you've got writing instruments and then the supporting stationery for it. And then the second category that you're thinking about is digitizing and entering a different yet related space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense because the company has actually decided to build their own drawing and coloring mobile app for both iOS and Android operating systems. And so could you help us to understand what is the size of their addressable market and what price should they set for their mobile app? And to do that, you can refer to Exhibit 2.
Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, so what I'm seeing is a chart that illustrates essentially the market penetration that we would get for various price points that we set for a potential Crayon company app. And so what makes sense to me is to multiply the number of customers on the x-axis by each price point to determine which price point gets the greatest number of net sales. And in order to do that, I would have to understand these percentages are percentages of what total number. For example, when you see like 100% of customers, is that 100% of like Americans or like customers that currently buy crayons?
Sure. So let's just look at the US. And so how would you think about, maybe sizing the market if we're looking at just the US? And household within the US, what are you thinking?
Okay. I guess to understand the market, well, before I even jump into that, I just want to clarify one thing. So what does this product do? Is it like an art application?
So it's just an app on your phone or your tablet. And so, maybe you use a stylus or just your fingers to fill in certain colors. So traditionally, if you'd done coloring where your kids had colored on paper, now they're just doing it on a mobile app.
Okay, got it. Great. So yeah, I just wanted to ask that to make sure that my hypothesis to look at the children's segment was a good hypothesis to go on. Okay, so yeah, what I would do is I would take the population of the U.S. and take the portion of that I believe are children, and then perhaps take another portion of that I believe are children who color, and I wonder, should I go even further and do percentage of those children who color who would pay money? Well, no, I guess that this chart captures that. Okay, so I'll just do what I said so far. So I'll take 300 million Americans and 5%.
Let's just work off of households in this. And for the purpose of simplicity, let's just say that 75% of all US households have tablets. And that surveys that Crayon Co. has done suggests that 50% of tablet-owning households would buy the app?
Okay. One thing that I want to clarify then, when you say 50% of tablet owners would buy the app, but I see that on the exhibit that there are certain price points where more than 50% of customers are willing to purchase the app. Is that a percentage of the 50% of that 50% you gave me?
No, so that's an independent calculation that we'll get to later on.
Okay.
But right now, if we just set aside the market, so just
Got
for
it.
the purpose, yeah, the 50% is for it.
Okay. And then I suppose I'll need to estimate the number of households in the US. I think the average household is a little bit more than 2 people, but less than 3. So if I would divide by a number that's more than 2 and less than 3. And so that would give me between 150 million and 100 million people. Would it be fair to say that there are 100 million households? Is that a reasonable estimate?
Let's just work off of 80.
80? Okay. 80 million. All right. And we know 75% of them have tablets. So 7.5 times 8. Okay, so 60 of them have tablets, and then half of those, or 30, so 30 million households would buy an app. Okay, so 30 million is the number I've arrived at.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so, why don't you look at Exhibit 2 again and see how we can use that information?
Okay. All right. So now combining these percentages, like when I see 100% of 99-cent customers, that means all 30 million would buy it, right? Okay, perfect. Okay, so for the 99-cent or just $1 customers, that would be 30 million purchases at $1 is $30 million. And then for the 199, so just say it's $2, that's about 75% of them. So 75% of 30 million is 22.5 million times $2 is 45 million at $2. And then at the $3 price, it would be 60% of 30 million, which is 18 million people, times $3 is 56 million. And then at the $4 price point, we have half of them, so 15 million people or households, times $4 is $60 million. And then lastly, at the $5 price point, we're looking at 30% of households. That's 9 million households. Purchasing at 5 is 9 times 5 is 45 and $45 million. Okay, so the most attractive price point that I'm seeing is $60 million that we get if we sell it at $3.99, because that's going to give us 50% market penetration. If we're going solely by the expected value in terms of dollars, that would be the most attractive price point to set on the app. But I would also say that it might be worth considering some neighboring price points, just because sometimes you might want to trade profit for penetration. So that's something else that's worth considering.
Got it. But, since the goal is to return ourselves to positive sales growth, do you still think that, we should be looking at higher penetration, or should we really be sticking with the $3.99 price?
Well, I guess since that you sort of specified a time frame of within next year, or in other words, just like a short time frame, I would probably prioritize the $3.99 just so that we're making as much money as possible in the near term.
That makes sense. And so if we were to roll out the app, how do you think our sales would fare for 2015?
Yeah, so we have 60 million that we're adding to our sales. And just looking at, I'm looking at last year's sales for the other products. For the purpose of your question, are you considering that we're still going to keep the marker and the coloring book lines, product
Yeah.
lines?
So we've decided to still go with those, but then roll out a new app instead.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and sum up the revenue numbers from the 4 product lines and add 60 million as our new additional product line to find a total.
And are you using, which revenues would you be using for it?
I'd be using, oh, okay. So I have 2014 revenues, but I suppose I should multiply them by the percent growth that was next to them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull up exhibit one more time. Okay, so I'm going to do that real quick. Sorry, it's loading.
No, don't worry about it. And again, this goes back to the question that you had. So if we continue all 4 product lines, then that is the revenue that we estimate. And if we add on this new app, then we're going to have different numbers altogether at the end of the year.
Okay, got it. So I'll just walk through my process before I jump into the calculations. So I'm going to take 140 million revenue for crayons and multiply it by 1.05 to account for the growth, and then 225 by 0.95, and then so on and so forth. I'm going to add it together and then add 60 million to that from the new product.
Yeah, that's
okay. Times 0.05. So 5 times 4 is 2. So the growth is $7 for crayons. So plus 7 is 147 total for crayons in 2015. Subtracting 5% of 225, that is 5 times 25 is $11.25 is the decline. So 225 minus 11.25 is about 213. So 213 is our revenue from markers in 2015. Next is pencils. 10% of 80 is just 8. So I'll subtract $8, and that's $72 for pencils. And then 15% of 35. I'm going to write that one out. 5 times 5 is 5 times 3 is 15, 17, 5, 2, 1. Okay, so 5.25 is the decline for coloring books. So that leaves us with 29.75, roughly 30. Okay, so 147 plus 213 is 360 plus 72 is 432 plus 30 is 462 plus finally the 60 million from the app is 522 million is our projected revenue for 2015.
That's right. And so what are you thinking in terms of, did we get to that point?
So I guess to properly answer that, I'm going to take the total sales from the previous year to see how the total compares from one year to the next. So to do that, I'll just simply add 140 plus 225 plus 80 plus 35. So 140 plus 225 is 365 plus 80 is 445 plus 35 is 480. So we're looking at 480 million in 2014 compared to 522 million in 2015. So strictly in terms of sales, we have achieved the client's objective with this app.
Got it. And so what would you recommend?
Yeah, can I take a few moments to gather my thoughts?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so my recommendation to our CEO is that we go digital with this Crayon company app, because this rollout, we project if we set a price point of $3.99 per download, it's going to make us $60 million in 2015. And as a result, our total projected revenue for 2015 is $522 million, which is $42 million more than our 2014 sales. Now, we do want to be mindful that there are some risks that come with this initiative. One is that we are going to require some investment in order to develop this app and test it and roll it out. So we want to make sure we do so in an efficient way that maximizes our chances for success. The other risk to keep in mind is that while this does achieve our objective to fix the flatlined revenues, we do have to be mindful that revenue is still going down because of our markers and coloring book lines, product lines. And so that is still something that we want to address in the future. And so next steps, what we can do is, as a firm, we can do that cost analysis for you, and we can explore those product lines and understand on a deeper level what is responsible for the decline in sales, so that we're not only making more money for you next year, but that we're ensuring that over the long term that will keep your company highly profitable.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.